Night settled over the airfield like a shroud. The clouds hung low, swollen with smoke from distant cities that still burned after another raid. Ground crews moved through the haze with lanterns half covered, their shadows stretching over the cracked concrete. Somewhere beyond the mist, engines murmured, not roaring, just murmuring, a sound too soft for a bomber, too steady for a fighter. Oberleutnant Franz Keller paused by his Messerschmitt, helmet in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. For weeks now, rumors had traveled through every Luftwaffe base in the West. A British aircraft, made of wood, some said, had appeared and vanished in the same moment, too fast for radar, too quiet for the ear. They called it Der Geist, the ghost. Some swore it was propaganda. Others whispered it was real, a machine that slipped between the cracks of sound and light. Inside the command hut, the radio hissed with static. Reports came in short, nervous bursts. A convoy near the Rhine had been hit in darkness. No bombers were spotted on radar. No engines were heard until the explosions came. Then silence again. Not a single pilot had seen what struck them. Only fragments of wood were found among the wreckage, thin, pale and charred. Franz tightened his gloves. He had flown against Spitfires, Hurricanes, even the heavy American bombers. They were loud, proud machines, visible, traceable, understandable. But this new phantom unnerved him. War was supposed to be noise, the roar of engines, the scream of sirens, the crash of steel. Now there was a weapon that replaced all that with absence. No sound, no warning. He climbed into the cockpit, canopy open to the cold. The air smelled of oil and fear. The floodlights were dimmed as the field commander gave the signal to patrol. Somewhere in the dark, the British ghost was said to be flying again, invisible, but felt. The radio crackled with call signs, clipped and uncertain. Minutes later, he lifted into the sky, swallowed by clouds thick as smoke. Below him, Germany slept in broken pieces of light. He listened for engines, but all he heard was his own breathing and the hum of his propeller. The radar remained blank, yet something was there. A pressure in the air, a flicker on the edge of vision. Then he saw it. A flash of movement between clouds. Pale wings gliding without flame, no exhaust trail, no sound. It passed beneath him like a shadow slipping over water. His instruments trembled for a moment, then steadied. He banked hard, scanning the black horizon. Nothing. The ghost was gone. But his heartbeat told him otherwise. Snow began to fall before dawn, dusting the ruined hangars with a thin white film that made everything look older than it already was. The airfield seemed frozen in time, each broken window and silent engine caught inside the stillness of defeat. Franz Keller had not slept. His logbook lay open on the table, the last entry incomplete, ink frozen halfway through a word. He kept hearing that sound again, the sound that was not a sound at all. Silence that pressed against the glass of his canopy, heavy and alive. The squadron gathered inside the ready room, boots clattering on concrete. A new officer from Berlin had arrived, young and certain, wearing a coat too clean for a frontline base. He spoke of radar calibration, of enemy tactics, of logic. His voice filled the room but convinced no one. Men who had seen the flash in the clouds no longer trusted logic. They trusted what they had felt. One pilot swore he had seen light reflect off something smooth and silver just before his wingman vanished into the dark. Another said he had fired at a blur and his guns jammed as if the air itself had swallowed the bullets. Franz said nothing. He sat by the window watching the fog move across the runway. Somewhere in that white curtain, the British machine waited. A few officers laughed about the ghost stories, calling them childish, but their laughter was thin. The radio operator brought news from Antwerp. 2 radar stations destroyed, no sign of intruders. All observers reported the same phrase, heard nothing, saw nothing, only silence before impact. The mechanic came in with a piece of wood found near the eastern perimeter. It looked like a fragment of furniture, smooth and burned on one edge. But when Franz turned it in his hands, he saw the faint trace of aircraft paint. The Berlin officer dismissed it as debris from a crashed transport, yet the mechanic whispered that the wood did not burn like normal material. It was light, almost hollow, and carried the faint smell of resin. That night, they flew again. The snow had turned into sleet, thin lines of rain slashing across the windshield. Franz led the patrol west, his wingman close behind. They climbed through turbulence into a ceiling of dark cloud where sound seemed to die. The radio hissed and then fell silent. No voices, no contact. Only the pulse of instruments glowing dimly in the cockpit. A sudden flicker passed his canopy, a faint glint, then nothing. He throttled forward, scanning left and right. His wingman called once, then the transmission broke. For a moment the clouds opened, revealing a pale outline above. It was not large, not heavy, just impossibly swift. The Mosquito. It curved upward, with grace no metal plane could match, its propellers barely audible, its shape dissolving into mist. Franz tried to follow, but his engine strained against the air. The ghost slid beyond reach, untouchable. He felt the weight of the chase in his chest, the helpless realization that speed and strength meant nothing against invisibility. As the clouds closed again, the world fell quiet, leaving him alone inside a vast, humming void. When he landed before dawn, the base was darker than when he left. Only one aircraft returned. His wingman's place on the tarmac stood empty, marked by a single trail of frozen footprints leading into fog. Franz stared at the empty space until morning, unable to tell if what he had seen in the sky was machine or myth, wood or wind. The silence still followed him, even as the sirens began to wail for another night raid he could not yet see. By February, the men had stopped asking questions. They no longer tried to explain what hunted them. The official bulletins called it a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft, nothing more, but the language of reports could not hide fear. They still called it the Ghost. Each new night, the same pattern returned. Radar silence, faint vibration, explosions, then nothing. Searchlights swept the clouds, finding only emptiness. The snow melted into mud, and with it, the last trace of certainty vanished from the base. Franz Keller carried the smell of oil on his uniform wherever he went. He had begun to write in his logbook again, though the words came slower, heavy with doubt. The entries no longer described missions, but memories, friends gone without wreckage, call signs fading mid-sentence. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he saw the pale outline gliding through the dark like a memory that refused to die. He wondered if the British pilots ever saw the faces of the men they left behind. At night, he visited the maintenance hangar where mechanics worked by the dull glow of lanterns. They spoke quietly about the new wooden aircraft, its surface smooth as glass, its weight lighter than air. Some had heard it was built from spruce and balsa, materials unworthy of war, yet blessed by speed. A rumor spread that the British had chosen wood because metal drew death. Wood absorbed it. Franz listened, silent, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of his Messerschmitt's fuselage. Cold steel, unforgiving, loud. He felt the difference in his bones. Orders came from higher command. Patrols would continue despite losses. Intelligence demanded proof, photographs, confirmation. The men obeyed because they had nothing else. That evening, as the horizon burned with artillery flashes, Franz prepared his aircraft for another mission. He adjusted the altimeter, checked the oxygen line, and glanced once more at the sky. The clouds looked like ash drifting over a dying fire. He wondered if the Ghost would come again, or if it was already there, watching. He took off just after midnight, climbing above the city lights. The radio crackled faintly, 2 other planes on the same route, voices tense, then static. The wind hissed around the cockpit, muffled by frost. For long minutes, nothing moved except the needle on his fuel gauge. Then, far below, he saw flickers of light, bursts of flak, gunfire from the ground. Something had passed overhead, fast and low, invisible except for the shock waves it left behind. Franz dove after it, eyes straining through the mist. His engine screamed. The altimeter spun. In the distance, he saw a shimmer, white against black, wings catching moonlight for a heartbeat. He fired. The tracers disappeared into clouds, swallowed whole. When he emerged, there was nothing. The Ghost had vanished again, leaving only stillness and the soft ticking of his instruments. He leveled the plane and turned homeward, his heartbeat echoing louder than the engine. Below him, fires glowed like dying stars across the countryside. The radio came alive for a moment, garbled, desperate words, and then silence returned. Franz thought of the wooden fragment still in his pocket, the one that smelled of resin and smoke. He wondered if one day the world would know that the British ghost was real, or if it would remain a rumor drifting forever through the ruins of the sky. The war was turning. Spring crept across the wreckage of Europe, melting snow into rivers that carried the smell of smoke and fuel. Airfields once proud with banners now looked hollow, half-abandoned, their runways cracked and glistening under the weak sun. Franz Keller walked among the silent aircraft, their propellers tied with ropes, their paint faded by wind and dust. The officers no longer spoke of victory. They spoke of endurance, of holding the line just one more week, one more flight. Yet, in every silence between their words, the ghost still lingered. The British Mosquito had become a legend even among those who had never seen it. Crews whispered that it flew faster than sound, that it could vanish into clouds and reappear behind you. Some said it carried no weapons, only cameras, its power drawn from invisibility. Others claimed it could strike with perfect accuracy and then dissolve into the fog. The truth mattered little now. Fear had already done its work. It had entered the hearts of the pilots, a quiet invasion more precise than any bomb. Franz was ordered to escort a convoy moving through the Ruhr Valley. It was his final assignment before reassignment to the Eastern Front, though everyone knew there would be no transfer, only retreat. He took off in the gray dawn, the horizon red with smoke. The air smelled of burning fuel and spring rain. Below him, the river shimmered like a vein of glass. His wingmen flew in tight formation, their voices short and dry over the radio. The convoy crept through the valleys, trucks no larger than her toys from this height. Everything seemed calm. Then the light changed. Shadows shifted, as if the clouds had closed a door above them. The radio filled with static. A shape emerged from the mist, slim, elegant, almost transparent against the sun. The Mosquito came from nowhere, diving low, its twin engines whispering rather than roaring. Franz turned to intercept, but his instruments lagged. The ghost passed between them, scattering the formation with silent precision. The convoy below erupted into confusion, drivers diving from trucks, guns firing blindly into the air. Franz locked the target, fired, and missed. The Mosquito was gone before his rounds reached the space it had occupied. He climbed after it, heart pounding, vision tunneling into gray. For a brief second he saw its markings, a pale cross, the glint of light on wood. Then it rolled upward, wings catching the morning sun like silver paper, and disappeared into the horizon. He followed until his fuel gauge neared zero. The engine sputtered. The sky widened, endless and empty. He realized the ghost was not meant to be caught. It existed between moments, between breaths. He turned back toward base, listening to the soft hum of his own machine, louder now in the absence of pursuit. When he landed, no one spoke. The convoy was gone, smoke curling from distant hills. Franz stepped from the cockpit and looked to the west. The clouds moved like pale ghosts across the sun, silent and untouchable. Somewhere out there, the British pilots flew home, unseen, uncelebrated, their wooden craft carrying the quiet promise of the future. For the first time, Franz understood what true power was. Not noise, not strength, but silence that could not be escaped. The war would end soon. Men would write books about mettle and glory, about battles won and lost. But none would capture that single moment when the sky itself seemed to disappear, when fear took the shape of silence and the ghost of the skies passed overhead, unseen, undefeated, already belonging to another world that was coming fast.